Regardless of what you think of Sam Harris, he offers a critique of Christianity here that I think deserves more attention.
Christianity is a cult of human sacrifice. Christianity is not a religion that repudiates human sacrifice. It is a religion that celebrates a single human sacrifice as though it were effective.
While there are diverse theories of the atonement, the biblical texts clearly display Jesus' death as a blood sacrifice. Quote, "But when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, he entered once for all into the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls, and the sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer, sanctify for purification of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to serve the living God." End quote. This raises a couple of issues. If you're a Christian and don't want to take this language too seriously in your view of the atonement, why is a morally perfect being using immoral concepts to illumine what Jesus accomplished? And if you do take it seriously, doesn't this mean that an essential part of the good news is that human sacrifice fundamentally works, as long as it's the right kind? A lot of those who do take it seriously hold to the penal substitutionary theory of atonement. This is, quote, "a view that stresses Christ's death as a perfect payment for the penalty of human sin that is accepted by God, whose wrath and judgment are satisfied by this work of Christ, the sinner's substitute." End quote. On this view, Jesus was ultimately killed as an offering to God that was meant to appease his wrath towards humanity, as punishment is meted out to him instead of sinful people. This is a basic sketch of what millions of Christians believe, and you'll see these themes arise time and time again in their hymns and worship songs. Whether any of this is logically or morally coherent is not something I plan on addressing here, but suffice it to say, I doubt it. So does Jesus' death in this framework count as a human sacrifice? Well, he's truly human, unless you're a heretic, and a sacrifice is defined by Oxford Languages as, quote, "an act of slaughtering an animal or person, or surrendering a possession as an offering to God or to a divine or supernatural figure," end quote. There are plenty of verses, at least read through the Christian lens, that suggest that God the Father ultimately killed Jesus. God sacrificed God to save us from God. Which is a thing that makes sense, I guess. Also, a cult is just, quote, "a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object," end quote. So yeah, in that sense, Christianity is definitely a cult. Anyway, a couple of interesting implications follow from these facts, at least apply to certain versions of Christianity. One is that there isn't anything intrinsically evil about such sacrifices, and another is that they fundamentally work when certain conditions are met. Not very plausible if you ask me, but then again, it's been a few years since I've sang a song about a fountain filled with the blood of an apocalyptic prophet. Jesus was a willing sacrifice, you might say. But this isn't a good objection, since the willingness of a participant has nothing to do with whether a death ought to be classified as a human sacrifice. The additional, "but he has a divine nature" retort fails too, because having a divine nature doesn't change the fact that his death on certain atonement theories checks all the boxes of what it means to be a human sacrifice. If the life of a human being is offered to a deity in the way described earlier, their death can plausibly be described as a human sacrifice. Period. His divine nature might have made his death more than a human sacrifice, but it doesn't make it less than a human sacrifice. Given all of this, I don't think cult of human sacrifice is an unfair descriptor for certain versions of Christianity. So what, you might say? That doesn't mean it isn't true. Well, it's actually questionable whether the reasoning behind a lot of this makes any sense. Tap this video next to me to see what I mean.